Hello and welcome to another episode of the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want to speak directly to that feeling inside you, the one that says, "Why can't I speak English fluently, even after all these years?" If that thought has ever crossed your mind, then this episode is for you. Let me ask you something. Do you understand English pretty well but freeze when it's time to speak? Have you spent years studying grammar, doing exercises, maybe even passing exams, but when someone talks to you in real life, you panic or go completely silent? You're not alone. In fact, that exact situation is one of the most common things I hear from learners around the world. And here's the truth. Your problem is not your intelligence. It's not your memory. It's not even your level. The real problem is the method. What most people don't realize is that the traditional way of learning English, memorizing vocabulary lists, studying grammar rules, filling in worksheets, is designed for testing, not for speaking. It trains your brain to analyze and remember, but not to react and respond in real time. And when you try to speak, you're not actually communicating. You're trying to recall and apply. That's a heavy cognitive load, and that's why your words get stuck. I want to tell you something that might change the way you see yourself. You are not bad at English. You are just practicing in a way that doesn't lead to fluency. It's like trying to learn to swim by reading books about water. You might know everything about how to float, how to breathe, and how to move your arms, but until you get in the pool and start moving, you're not really swimming. Language works the same way. And the worst part, when you feel stuck, you start to believe that something is wrong with you. You begin to tell yourself, maybe I'm not good at languages, or maybe I started too late, or maybe I'll never be fluent. That voice becomes louder the longer you stay silent. But I'm here to tell you fluency is not about talent or age or even how long you've studied. Fluency is about what you do every day with the English you already know. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to wait until you've memorized more vocabulary. What you need is practice that mirrors real life. You need confidence, and confidence doesn't come from theory. It comes from action. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever met someone who speaks English fluently but makes a lot of grammar mistakes? I know I have. I've met people from all over the world: Spain, Italy, Germany, Poland, who speak with confidence and clarity, even though their grammar isn't always perfect. And you know what? No one cares. People care about understanding you, not about judging every word you say. If this is starting to make sense for you, if you're starting to see that maybe your struggle isn't your fault, then I want to invite you to make a new decision today. Decide that you are not going to wait for fluency to magically happen. Decide to change the way you practice. Decide to speak more, even when it feels uncomfortable. This podcast is all about helping you do that. Every episode is here to give you real, practical tools that you can use not someday, but today. And I want you to be part of this movement. We're a global community of English learners and speakers who are working together to grow, step by step, without pressure or fear. We believe in progress, not perfection. So if this message resonates with you, if you're ready to stop feeling like you're stuck, invite you to support this podcast by subscribing to our channel and giving this episode a like. It's a simple way to say, yes, I'm in. I'm ready to learn differently. I'm ready to speak, and your support helps this message reach more people who are struggling silently, just like you might have been. You don't have to go through this alone. We are building something powerful here. And I promise you, if you stay with me and apply what I share, your English will start to change. Not because you studied more, but because you practiced smarter. Because you changed how you saw yourself. Because you started using your voice. Now take a deep breath. Let go of the pressure. You're here, and that means you're already doing something different. You're not just learning English. You're choosing to live it. And that choice is the first step toward real fluency. Welcome to the community. Let's begin. Let me tell you about someone who reminds me of many of you. Her name is Elise. She's from Paris, and she has been studying English for more than 10 years. She went to private classes, followed multiple online courses, and watched more YouTube videos than she could count. Her notebooks were filled with grammar rules, vocabulary lists, and pronunciation notes. She had apps on her phone, flashcards on her desk, and English subtitles on every movie she watched. From the outside, she looked like someone who was doing everything right. But here's what Elise told me when we first spoke. Julia, I know so much. I can read articles, understand podcasts, and even help my son with his English homework. But when someone asks me a simple question in English, what do you do? Where are you from? I freeze. I don't know what happens. The words are in my head, but they don't come out. Her voice trembled when she said that. And I could see it in her eyes, the frustration, the doubt, the disappointment. After 10 years of effort, she still felt like a beginner. And the worst part wasn't the difficulty of speaking. The worst part was the shame. The shame of thinking, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? If you're listening right now and you've ever felt like Elise, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not broken. You are not bad at English. And there is nothing wrong with your brain. What's holding you back is not a lack of intelligence or dedication, it's a mindset. Elise had been trained to aim for perfection. Every time she thought about speaking, her brain went into correction mode. She didn't want to make a mistake. She didn't want to sound wrong. So instead of taking a chance and speaking freely, she stayed quiet. She thought that silence was safer, but silence never leads to fluency. What Elise didn't realize at the time, and what so many learners don't realize, is that speaking is not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about allowing yourself to be heard even if your grammar isn't perfect. It's about connection, not correction. I asked Elise to tell me why she thought she was still struggling. She said, I think I'm waiting to feel ready. I'm waiting to feel fluent before I start speaking. And there it was, the trap that so many fall into. The idea that fluency comes first, and speaking comes later. But that's backwards. Speaking is not the result of fluency. Speaking is the path to fluency. When Elise started learning English, she was taught to focus on accuracy. Her teachers corrected every mistake. Her classmates laughed when she mispronounced a word. Over time, that created fear. She became hyper-aware of every sentence she formed. And eventually, that fear grew stronger than her desire to speak. So she stopped trying, and still, she kept studying. She kept watching videos and reading books, hoping that someday she would feel confident enough to speak. But that day never came, because confidence doesn't come from watching others speak, it comes from using your own voice. One day, Elise told me she had been invited to a job interview in English. She almost declined the opportunity, thinking she wasn't ready. But something inside her pushed back. What if I try? She asked. What if I go and do my best, even if I make mistakes? That shift in her thinking was powerful. She stopped chasing perfection and started focusing on communication. She realized that her value wasn't measured by her grammar but by her willingness to connect and be understood. We practiced together, not by going over tenses or reviewing conditional structures, but by using simple, clear phrases. I asked her to answer basic questions out loud every day, nothing fancy, just everyday language. Tell me about your morning. What do you like about your job? Describe your favorite book. And slowly, her confidence started to grow. Not because she learned something new, but because she gave herself permission to speak with what she already knew. At the interview, Elise made a few mistakes. She forgot a word here and there, but she smiled, she breathed, and she answered every question. Later, She told me it was the first time she had spoken English without the voice of judgment in her head. She was proud not because she had been perfect, but because she had been brave. That's what I want you to take from Elise's story. The fear you feel is real, but it doesn't have to control your actions. You can feel afraid and still choose to speak. You can be imperfect and still be understood. You don't need more years of study. You need more moments of courage. When you aim for perfection, you stay silent. But when you aim for expression, even simple expression, you start to grow. And once you give yourself permission to speak like a learner, not like a native, not like an expert, but like a real person learning a language, you unlock the part of yourself that's been waiting all this time. Elise didn't need a new textbook. She needed a new belief that she was already enough to begin. And so are you. I want to talk to you today about something that quietly destroys your progress without you even noticing. It's called the perfection trap. And it's one of the biggest reasons why so many English learners never reach fluency, even when they study for years. I've seen it over and over again. People who know a lot about English but still can't speak. People who are afraid to open their mouths because they're worried the words won't come out right. And at the center of it all is this powerful, silent idea: if I can't speak perfectly, I shouldn't speak at all. Let's be honest, have you ever thought that way? Have you ever stopped yourself from speaking in a meeting, or with a friend, or even in an English class, because you weren't 100% sure you would say everything correctly? Have you ever practiced a sentence in your head 10 times and still decided not to say it, just because you were afraid it might come out wrong? That fear doesn't come from nowhere. Most of us were taught that mistakes are bad. In school, we were corrected all the time. Red marks on tests, strict teachers, even classmates who laughed when someone mispronounced a word. That kind of environment trains us to avoid making errors. It teaches us that it's better to stay quiet than to speak and risk embarrassment. And that habit follows us into adulthood. It shows up in the way we practice. It shows up in the way we judge ourselves. It even shows up in the way we avoid opportunities that could help us grow. I meet people every week who say, "I'll speak more when I feel ready." But what they mean is, "I'll speak more when I can be perfect," and that day never comes, because perfection is not a real goal, it's an excuse. It's a wall that your brain builds to keep you safe. But in reality, it's not keeping you safe. It's keeping you stuck. I know it feels scary to speak with mistakes. You might think people will judge you, or that they won't understand. But the truth is, most people don't care if you make a mistake. They care if they can understand you. They care if you can express your ideas clearly. And you don't need perfection to do that. You need clarity, and you need courage. Let me give you a small example. If someone says, "Yesterday I go to store," we all know that the correct form is "went to the store." But guess what? I still understood what they meant. The message was clear. The grammar wasn't perfect, but the communication was successful. And that's what speaking is about: making yourself understood, not passing a test. Some of the most fluent non-native speakers I've met still make small grammar mistakes. But they speak confidently, they express themselves naturally, and they don't let those mistakes stop them. Why? Because they're focused on the message, not the mechanics. They understand that fluency is not about speaking like a native, it's about speaking like yourself, with confidence and clarity. Perfection is a moving target. Even native speakers don't speak perfectly. We hesitate. We correct ourselves. We say and forget words. But we keep talking. We trust that our ideas matter more than our grammar. And that's what I want you to start practicing. 2. I know this shift is not easy. Letting go of perfection means being okay with being vulnerable. It means showing up with your real voice, not your rehearsed one. But here's the secret: fluency grows through those imperfect moments. Every time you speak with mistakes and still connect with someone, your confidence grows. Every time you take a risk and survive it, you get stronger. So, how do you break the perfection trap? First, you have to change your goal. Stop aiming to sound like a textbook. Start aiming to be understood. Instead of thinking, "Did I say it right?" ask yourself, "Did they understand me?" That simple change will help you relax and communicate more naturally. Second, simplify your language. You don't need complex words or advanced grammar to express your ideas. In fact, the most effective speakers are often the ones who use the simplest, clearest sentences. Think about how you would explain something to a friend, not to a grammar teacher. That's the kind of English that works in the real world. And finally, practice in real situations. Don't wait until you feel fluent to start speaking. Speak now, with the English you have today. Talk to yourself in the mirror. Record your voice and listen back. Say simple sentences out loud during your day. The more you use your voice, the less power the fear will have over you. Remember, confidence doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from doing something even when you don't feel ready. And every time you choose to speak, even if it's messy, you're building that confidence. You're training your brain to connect thoughts and words more easily. You're making fluency possible, one imperfect sentence at a time. Let go of the pressure to sound perfect. It's not helping you. In fact, it's holding you back. Choose progress over perfection. Choose clarity over complexity. Choose your voice over your fear. You don't need to be perfect to speak. You just need to be brave enough to try. And every time you try, you grow. One of the most common things I hear from English learners is this: "I need to study more grammar." I hear it all the time from beginners, from intermediate learners, even from advanced students who have been studying English for years. There's this deep belief that fluency will finally arrive once all the grammar is perfect, once every verb tense is mastered, once every rule is understood. But the truth is, grammar is not what's missing. What most people really need is more repetition, simple, practical, consistent repetition. I want you to think about how you learned your first language. You didn't start by learning grammar rules. You didn't open a textbook when you were 2 years old and read about subject-verb agreement. You listened. You repeated. You heard the same words and phrases over and over again in real-life situations. And slowly, your brain made the connections. Fluency grew from exposure and use, not from study and memorization. That process works for English too. Now, I'm not saying grammar has no value. Of course, grammar helps us understand the structure of the language. It helps clarify meaning and supports better writing. But for speaking for real fluency, you need to train your brain to use the language, not just recognize it. And that happens through repetition, not analysis. Many learners make the mistake of constantly switching topics. One week they study the past simple, the next week it's phrasal verbs, then conditionals, then passive voice. It becomes a cycle of collecting information, but not using it. And the result is that nothing sticks. You might understand the rule, but you can't apply it when you speak. Why? Because your brain hasn't had enough repetition to make it automatic. Let me explain something important. Speaking fluently is not the same as knowing a lot. It's about quick access. When you're in a conversation, you don't have time to think about rules. You need to respond, and you need to do it fast. That kind of speed doesn't come from learning more. It comes from practicing what you already know until it becomes natural. I remember talking to a student named Marco from Rome. He had studied English in school, at university, and even did a few online courses. He knew all the grammar rules probably better than most native speakers. But when it was time to speak, he hesitated, searched for words, and translated everything in his head. He said, "I know the rule, but I can't speak." And I told him, "That's because you don't need another grammar book. You need to repeat what you already know until your brain can use it without thinking. So we started something simple. Every day, he practiced just 5 useful phrases. Things like, "Can I help you with that? Let me think about it. I'm not sure, but I believe." And "That sounds like a great idea." We practiced those same phrases again and again in different contexts. After 2 weeks, he began using them automatically in real conversations. His confidence grew, not because he learned something new, but because he trained his brain through repetition. This kind of repetition is not boring when done right. It's about using the language in meaningful ways, in your voice, in your life. It means taking one small piece of language and making it yours. Instead of reading 10 grammar explanations, choose one sentence and say it 10 different ways. Play with it. Change the subject, the object, the tone. That's how real fluency is built. Repetition also creates clarity. And clarity is far more important than complexity. So many learners think they need to use difficult words or advanced grammar to sound fluent. But the most powerful communication happens when your message is simple and clear. Think about great speakers in any language. They don't use complicated structures. They use short, strong, clear sentences. That's what sticks. That's what moves people. I want you to stop chasing the next rule. I want you to stop thinking that fluency is always one step ahead of where you are now. The truth is, you probably already know enough English to have a real conversation. You just haven't repeated it enough times to trust yourself. And that's what we're here to fix. Start with what you know. Take simple phrases that you use in your native language and translate them into English. Practice saying them out loud every day. Record your voice. Listen and repeat. Don't try to be perfect, try to be consistent. The goal is to build mental shortcuts, so your brain can go from idea to expression without stopping to analyze. This is also why watching TV or listening to podcasts alone isn't enough. It gives you input, which is great, but it doesn't give you output. You need to produce the language to train your mouth, your muscles, your memory. It's not about passive learning, it's about active training. Let me give you another example. A student named Lee from Amsterdam once told me she spent hours every day watching series in English. But when she tried to speak, she still froze. So we added one step. Every time she heard a sentence she liked, she paused and repeated it out loud. Slowly, clearly, with her own voice. Then she repeated it again and again. Within a few weeks, her spoken English started to flow in a way it never had before. The difference wasn't knowledge. It was repetition. Repetition builds habits. It turns knowledge into skill. It gives you the power to speak without fear, because the words are already inside you, ready to be used. You don't have to think. You don't have to guess, you just speak. So if you're someone who feels stuck, who keeps thinking, I should study more, take a step back and ask yourself, do I really need more information, or do I just need to practice what I already know? Most of the time, it's the second one. Remember, you don't need to master all the grammar rules to be a fluent speaker. You need to master a few simple things and repeat them so often that they become a part of you. Fluency is not a mountain of knowledge, it's a rhythm of use. And every time you repeat something with intention, you take one more step in the right direction. Let me tell you a story that perfectly shows how small actions done consistently can create a big transformation. It's about Tomas, an accountant from Warsaw. He worked in a large international company where English was the language of all meetings and emails. On paper, Tomas had everything he needed. He had passed official English exams. He understood most emails without using a translator. He could even write short reports. But when it came to speaking, especially in meetings, he felt paralyzed. He once told me, I sit in meetings and understand almost everything. I even have ideas. But I say nothing. I'm afraid my words will come out wrong, or people will think I'm slow. Tomas wasn't a beginner. He wasn't lazy or unmotivated. He simply didn't trust his spoken English. And because of that, he stayed silent even though his colleagues, many of whom had less experience than him, were speaking confidently. This lack of confidence started to affect more than just his job. He began to avoid social events at work. He turned down invitations to speak with clients. He even started considering changing departments just to escape the pressure of English meetings. But deep down, he didn't want to run away. He wanted to participate. He just didn't know how to cross the gap between knowing English and speaking it with confidence. That's when he and I had our first conversation. He explained everything. He had tried grammar courses, vocabulary apps, even English books. But the more he studied, the more overwhelmed he felt. He said, "I'm learning too much, but using nothing." I looked at him and said, "Let's stop learning for a minute. Let's start using." We made a simple plan. Tomas would choose one phrase each day, just one. A useful phrase he could imagine saying at work. Something like, "Let me finish my point," or "Can you clarify that?" or "Agree with your suggestion." Nothing complicated, just real phrases that matched his professional environment. He wrote the phrase on a sticky note and placed it on his desk. Every time he looked at it, he said it out loud. He said it in the morning while brushing his teeth. He said it during lunch. He whispered it during his walk home. The rule was, say it at least 10 times a day. Not write it, not study it, just speak it aloud, with intention. The next day, he chose a new phrase, then another. After a week, he had 7 phrases. After a month, he had over 20. These weren't random words. They were real tools, ready to be used in his meetings. And he wasn't just memorizing them, he was training his mouth, his voice, his rhythm. Slowly, he started to believe that he could use these phrases when it mattered. Then something unexpected happened. During a small team call, his manager asked for feedback on a new internal system. Tomas felt that old fear rise inside. But then, he remembered the phrase he had been practicing that week. "From my perspective, this could work better with." And just like that, he said it. His voice wasn't loud. He didn't give a long speech. But he spoke, clearly, naturally. And when the meeting ended, his manager even thanked him for his input. That one phrase opened a door. After that, Tomas began speaking a little more often. Sometimes it was just a short sentence. Sometimes it was agreeing with someone else's opinion. And always, he used the phrases he had practiced before. Over time, those phrases became his building blocks. They gave him confidence. And with that confidence came more participation, more respect, and more responsibility at work. Tomas didn't change his English level overnight. He didn't take a new course or move to an English-speaking country. What he did was simpler and more powerful. He built a habit, one phrase a day, spoken with his own voice, in his own context, over and over again. The reason I love Tomas's story is because it proves something I say all the time. You don't need a big plan to make progress. You don't need 5 hours a day or a perfect study routine. You need consistency. You need practice that fits into your life. You need to stop waiting until you're ready and start speaking with what you have today. So many learners believe that only big efforts create big results. But the truth is, small actions done daily are stronger than big actions done occasionally. Tomas didn't try to memorize 100 phrases. He focused on one, but he repeated it, used it, made it his. That's how language becomes part of you, not through pressure, but through repetition and use. I want you to think about your own routine. What's one phrase you can use today? Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Maybe something you often hear at work. Maybe something you wish you could say in a conversation. Write it down. Say it aloud. Say it again. Make it real. What Tomas learned is that fluency isn't a test you pass. It's a skill you build one piece at a time. And every phrase you make your own is one step closer to being the speaker you want to become. His journey started with a single sentence. Yours can too. Today I want to introduce you to something that might completely change how you approach your English learning journey. It's the habit of thinking in English. If you've never tried this before, or if you've tried and given up quickly, stay with me because this is one of the most powerful tools for real fluency, and it doesn't require more grammar, more vocabulary, or more time. It requires a change in how you use the English you already know. Let me start by asking you something simple. When you speak English, do you first think in your native language, then try to translate the sentence in your head before saying it? Most learners do this, and it makes total sense in the beginning. After all, your thoughts are naturally formed in your first language. So when you need to speak English, your brain grabs the idea, searches for the right words in English, and then builds the sentence step by step. That sounds logical, but the problem is that it's slow, stressful, and often leads to mistakes. This process creates a kind of mental traffic jam. While your brain is busy translating, the moment of conversation is moving forward. Someone asks you a question, and you pause not because you don't know the answer, but because your brain is doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work to translate it. That pause feels uncomfortable. You lose confidence. You start to doubt yourself. And soon, you prefer to stay quiet instead of speaking at all. Now imagine something different. Imagine hearing a question in English and responding without that pause. No translation. No searching. Just your thoughts, directly in English. That's what thinking in English makes possible. It's not about speaking fast. It's about speaking freely without that invisible filter that slows you down and makes you doubt your abilities. Thinking in English isn't something that just happens one day. It's a habit, a trainable, learnable skill that grows with consistent effort. And the good news is, you don't need to be advanced to start. You can begin thinking in English at any level, using the words and phrases you already know. When I talk to learners who have made real progress, one of the things they all mention is this moment when they stopped translating. It didn't happen overnight, but it began with small steps, simple phrases, everyday thoughts. Instead of saying, "I'm going to the store" in their native language and then translating it in their mind, they just started to say it in English. Silently, sometimes, out loud, other times. But little by little, they started to live more of their daily thoughts in English. One of my students, Dario from Milan, had a habit of narrating everything in his head but in Italian. When I suggested he start doing that in English instead, even with basic phrases, his speaking speed improved within weeks. He told me, at first it was strange, and I had to push myself, but then it started to feel normal. Now, I catch myself thinking in English, even when I'm not trying. That's exactly how it works at first. You do it consciously. Later, it becomes automatic. So how do you start? The first step is to reduce the complexity. Don't try to think in long, complicated sentences. Start with what you already say to yourself every day. Things like, "I'm hungry," "I need to check my email," "It's cold today," "I like this song." These are the kinds of thoughts that run through your mind constantly, and they're the perfect place to start building the habit. Next, attach English to specific routines. For example, when you wake up in the morning, say your first thoughts in English. "It's Monday. I have a meeting at 10. I need to shower." During your commute, look around and name the things you see in English. Red car, tall building, busy street. Before going to sleep, review your day in simple English thoughts. "Today was a good day. I had lunch with Anna. I worked hard." These moments might feel small, but they build a powerful foundation. You're training your brain to reach for English first, not as a translation, but as your direct line of thought. This helps you react faster, think more clearly, and speak with more confidence. The mistake many learners make is believing that they can only think in English after they're fluent. But the truth is, you become fluent because you start thinking in English. The process creates fluency, not the other way around. Even if your vocabulary is limited, even if your grammar isn't perfect, you can still start this practice. Another benefit of thinking in English is that it prepares your mind for real conversations. If you're already forming thoughts in English throughout the day, you'll feel more natural when it's time to speak with someone. Your brain doesn't have to switch languages. The sentence is already there, ready to be said. And this reduces anxiety and hesitation, which are two of the biggest barriers to speaking. Also, thinking in English gives you constant exposure without needing extra time. You don't need to be in a class or in front of a screen. You can practice during your daily routines, when you're walking, cooking, getting dressed, or even waiting in line. It's private, it's free, and it's powerful. I also want to remind you that it's okay if your inner thoughts in English are simple. That's actually a good thing. Simple means clear, and clear is what fluency needs. You're not writing a novel in your head, you're building the habit of using English as your natural language of thought. Over time, the thoughts become more complex. Your vocabulary grows. Your sentences become more flexible. But it all starts with consistency. One final tip: if you don't know how to say something in English, don't give up. Try to find another way to say it. That moment of searching is valuable. It pushes your brain to stay in English instead of returning to your native language. You'll be surprised how creative you can become when you limit yourself to the language. This challenge strengthens your ability to express ideas, even when your words are limited. Thinking in English is like building a bridge between your knowledge and your speech. It connects what you understand with what you can say. And once that bridge is strong, everything changes. You begin to feel that English isn't just something you study. It becomes something you live. And that shift is where real fluency begins. One of the most underrated and powerful habits you can build as an English learner is speaking out loud, especially when you're alone. I know, it might sound strange at first. Many people feel a little silly doing it. You might worry that someone will hear you or that you'll sound weird talking to yourself. But let me tell you something important. Speaking out loud, even when no one is listening, can completely transform your ability to speak English naturally and confidently. Here's the truth: fluency doesn't just live in your brain. It lives in your mouth, your tongue, your jaw, and your breath. Your voice is a muscle, and like any muscle, it needs training. Reading and listening help you understand English, but speaking, actually using your voice, is what helps you produce English. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I've worked with learners from all over the world: Germany, Portugal, Sweden, Greece, who felt stuck for years. They had taken courses, read books, and passed exams, but they still couldn't speak comfortably in real situations. The missing piece? They never trained their speaking muscle. They never practiced saying the words out loud when they were alone. They were waiting for the right moment to practice, usually during a conversation with someone else. But those moments were rare, and when they came, the pressure was high. And that's when everything fell apart. Speaking out loud when you're alone is the opposite of that. There's no pressure. There's no judgment. It's a safe space where you can try, repeat, make mistakes, correct yourself, and try again. And what happens over time is that your brain and your mouth start working together. You think in English, you speak in English, and the words come faster because the pathway has already been built. Let me give you a real example. I once worked with a software engineer named Lena from Berlin. She was great at understanding English, but every time she had to speak, especially in meetings, she froze. Her brain worked quickly, but her mouth couldn't keep up. We talked about her routine, and I noticed something. She never spoke English unless someone asked her a direct question. She studied alone. She read technical manuals. She watched English language tutorials, but she never used her voice. So I gave her a challenge. For 5 minutes a day, she had to talk to herself out loud in English. Nothing fancy. Just describe what she was doing, or what her day was like, or what she was planning to cook. She could walk around the house and say things like, "Now I'm making coffee," or "I'm going to check my email after this." At first, she laughed. It felt weird, but she agreed to try. 2 weeks later, she came back and said, "Julia, something's different. I feel more confident when I speak." She hadn't learned any new vocabulary. She hadn't reviewed any grammar rules. But she had trained her voice. She had practiced turning thoughts into words. And the more she did it, the less strange it felt and the more natural her English started to sound. That's the hidden power of speaking out loud when you're alone. It gives you time and space to slow down and focus. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not rushing. You're simply practicing the act of speaking. And that repetition builds fluency in a way that silent study never will. If you've never tried this before, I encourage you to start small. Choose a time when you're alone, maybe in the morning while you're getting ready, or in the car, or while you're doing chores. Start by narrating your actions. "I'm brushing my teeth. I need to find my keys. I'm going to wear my black shoes today." These sentences may seem simple, but they're incredibly powerful because they reflect real-life language. They're the sentences you need every day. Once that feels natural, you can take it a step further. Start talking about your thoughts. "I'm feeling tired today, maybe because I didn't sleep well. I hope this meeting goes smoothly. I'm excited about the weekend." When you practice this kind of language regularly, you're building a bridge between what you think and what you say. And that's exactly what fluency is. Another great practice is to retell your day in English at night. Just 5 minutes before bed, try to explain to yourself what happened. "I had a meeting with my team. We talked about the new project. I gave some suggestions. If you get stuck, try to describe it in another way." The goal isn't perfection, the goal is connection. You're teaching your brain to speak English as your first response, not as a translation. You can also use shadowing. This is when you listen to someone speaking in English, maybe a short podcast or a video, and you repeat what they say out loud, almost at the same time. This helps train your rhythm, pronunciation, and intonation. It might feel challenging at first, but it's one of the fastest ways to sound more natural. But even if you don't shadow or retell anything complicated, just the act of using your voice makes a huge difference. Every time you say something out loud, you're strengthening the connection between your brain and your mouth. You're reminding yourself that you have a voice in English, and that voice deserves to be used. Some people ask me, "But what if I make a mistake while talking to myself?" And I always smile when I hear that. Because it doesn't matter. In fact, it's better that you make the mistake now, when no one is listening. That's how you learn. That's how you correct and grow. Mistakes made in private become improvements. In public, I want you to feel the power of your own voice. I want you to experience how much clarity, control, and confidence grows just from speaking a little more every day. You don't need a partner. You don't need a classroom. You need a few minutes, your voice, and a willingness to sound imperfect while getting stronger. This is a practice I've seen change people's lives, not just their English, but their belief in themselves. Because when you hear your own voice in English every day, you stop feeling like a learner and start feeling like a speaker. And that shift changes everything. Let me introduce you to Anya from Berlin. She's a graphic designer who lives near Alexanderplatz and works in a busy office not far from Potsdamer Platz. Every morning, she takes the U-Bahn to work. It's about a 20-minute ride, and like many people, she used to spend that time scrolling through her phone, listening to music, or just staring out the window. She told me that for years, she thought about using her commute time to improve her English, but she never really knew how. She didn't want to pull out grammar books on the train or start a conversation with a stranger. It just didn't feel realistic. When we first started working together, she said something that I've heard from many others. I understand English well, but when I try to speak, my brain goes blank. I asked her what her daily practice looked like. She said she listened to English podcasts now and then, but she wasn't really speaking at all. I told her something simple. If you want to speak, you have to speak. She laughed and said, but I have no one to speak with. That's when I gave her the idea that would completely change her relationship with English. Talk to yourself during your commute. No pressure, no audience, no perfection, just your voice and your thoughts. I told her to try something that sounds almost too simple to work. I said, narrate your morning in English, out loud or in a whisper, while you're on the train. Nothing complicated. Just describe what you're doing and what you're thinking. She agreed to try. The next morning, while walking to the station, she started with, "It's cold today," then added, "I think I forgot my umbrella." When she got on the train, she continued silently, mouthing the words, "There are a lot of people today, and I hope I have time for coffee before my first meeting." That's how it started. Simple, quiet, and awkward, but she did it anyway. After 1 week, Anya messaged me saying, "It feels strange, but kind of fun. My English doesn't sound so foreign to me anymore." That's exactly what happens. When you use English with your own voice, even in a private way, it stops feeling like a school subject. It starts feeling like a tool you can actually use. Her vocabulary wasn't growing quickly, but her access to the vocabulary she already had was getting faster. Because she wasn't translating, she was thinking and speaking directly in English. She kept going. Day after day, she built a quiet but powerful routine. She started adding details. "I didn't sleep well last night," or "I need to send that email before noon." She imagined little conversations. Sometimes she would practice what she might say if she bumped into a colleague or had to explain a project. No scripts, no pressure, just imagination and repetition. By the end of the second month, she told me something amazing. She said, "I had a real conversation with one of our new interns from Canada, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to plan every sentence. I just spoke." That moment of ease, that feeling of freedom, didn't come from grammar lessons or vocabulary quizzes. It came from those 20 minutes on the train every morning, whispering to herself and training her mind to think in English. Anya's story is one of my favorites because it shows what's possible when you work with what you have. She didn't change her schedule. She didn't need special materials. She just used a moment that was already part of her day, her commute, and turned it into something powerful. That's what real language growth looks like. It fits into your life. It builds on your habits. And it rewards consistency over intensity. Her confidence also grew in other areas. She started writing her to-do lists in English. She left short notes for herself in English. When thinking about what to cook for dinner, she would describe the ingredients in English. Little things, but they added up. Slowly, English became part of how she moved through the world. If you're listening to this and wondering if something that small can really make a difference, I want you to know that it can. Because fluency doesn't come from dramatic changes. It comes from regular use. You don't need to live in an English-speaking country. You don't need to wait until you have a speaking partner. Your own voice, your daily life, and your willingness to try are more than enough to make progress. What I love most about what Anya did is how natural it became. She didn't force herself to use complicated words or perfect grammar. She focused on clarity, She focused on speaking what she was actually thinking, and because of that, her English became more automatic. Her speaking became faster, and more importantly, she started to enjoy the process. She told me once, "I don't see English as something separate from my life anymore. It's just part of how I go through my day." That shift is what we're aiming for, not just learning English, but living it. And you can begin that process wherever you are, no matter what your level is, even if your thoughts are basic. I need to buy milk. The train is late again. I like this song. They are valuable because they are yours. They are real. And when you speak them in English, you are creating a direct connection between your thoughts and your voice. That connection is where fluency grows, not in a test, not in a rulebook, but in those tiny moments when you speak without fear, even if you're the only one who hears it. That's what Anya learned on her way to work. And it's what you can start doing today. Your voice is ready. You don't need permission to use it. Start with what you know. Say it out loud. Say it again tomorrow. And watch how quickly your English starts to feel like it belongs to you. One of the biggest misunderstandings I see in English learners is this belief: if I listen to English every day, I'll become fluent. And I understand why so many people believe that. Listening feels easy. It fits into your daily routine. You can listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, put on a Netflix series, and feel like you're doing something productive. And in a way, you are. Listening is important. It helps you absorb vocabulary, understand rhythm, and get familiar with pronunciation. But here's the truth that many learners don't realize: listening alone is not enough. If you want to speak fluently, you have to respond. You have to practice producing the language, not just receiving it. Speaking is an active skill. It's like playing the piano or riding a bike. You can't just watch someone else do it and expect your body to know how. You have to move your fingers, make mistakes, adjust, try again, and slowly get better. Language works the same way. Watching and listening help your brain, but speaking trains your mouth, your breath, your rhythm, and your memory. And that only happens when you open your mouth and actually respond. Let me give you an example. I once worked with a student named Henrik from Oslo. He had been watching American TV shows and listening to English podcasts for years. He understood almost everything. His vocabulary was strong, and his pronunciation was better than average. But when he tried to speak in meetings at work, he struggled. His words came out slowly. His sentences were messy. He said, "It's like I understand everything, but when it's my turn to speak, I freeze." That's because his listening was passive. It was going in, but nothing was coming out. So we changed his routine. I asked him to continue listening, but with one difference. Every time he heard a sentence, he had to pause and repeat it in his own words. Not just echo it, but paraphrase it. If someone in a podcast said, "Today we're going to explore 3 reasons why people procrastinate," Henrik would pause and say something like, "They'll talk about why people avoid doing things." Or, "The episode is about people delaying tasks." This small shift from passive listening to active response changed everything for him. He was no longer just understanding English. He was using it. And that difference is what builds fluency. I want you to try the same. The next time you watch a video or listen to a podcast in English, pause after every few sentences. Don't just repeat the exact words. Try to explain what you just heard in your own way. Even if you make mistakes, that's okay. You're not taking a test. You're training your brain to connect meaning and expression. You're building your voice in English. There's a technique I often teach called shadowing with response. It starts with simple shadowing, repeating what you hear at the same time or just after the speaker. But then, you add your own version of the sentence. Let's say you hear, "She's been working on this project for 3 months. First, you repeat, "She's been working on this project for 3 months." Then you say something like, "She started the project 3 months ago," or "She has spent a lot of time on it." You're not just copying, you're thinking, transforming, and speaking. That's how real progress happens. Another thing I suggest is to talk back to what you hear. Imagine you're part of the conversation. If you're listening to someone, describe their daily routine, respond with yours. "Oh, you start your day with coffee?" "I drink tea in the morning." Or, "You go jogging before work?" "I usually go for a walk after dinner." These are imaginary conversations, but they train your brain to react quickly in real ones. You're not waiting for a perfect opportunity to speak English. You're creating it. People often say to me, "But Julia, I don't have anyone to practice with." And my answer is always the same: your voice is enough. You can practice active listening and response alone. All you need is audio input, a few minutes of focus, and the willingness to speak out loud. That alone will put you ahead of most learners who are still only listening passively and hoping fluency will arrive. Think about it this way. You've probably listened to thousands of hours of English already. If listening alone was enough, you'd be fluent by now. So if you feel stuck, the missing piece is probably output speaking, responding, using what you hear in real time. Let's take a common daily example. You're watching a cooking video in English. Don't just watch and listen. When the chef says, "Now we add the onions," pause the video and say, "She's putting onions in the pan," or "The next step is adding onions," then go further. "In my kitchen, I usually use garlic instead," or "I've never tried this recipe before." Suddenly, it's not just input, it's interaction. This doesn't take extra time. You're still watching the same content. You're just changing how you use it. You're turning a passive activity into an active one, and that's where growth happens. It's also helpful to write down a few of your responses. Nothing long, nothing formal, just a few lines that reflect your own thoughts in English. Writing and speaking work together. When you respond in writing, you give yourself time to organize your ideas. When you speak, you train for speed and flow. Both help build fluency. What I want you to take from this is simple. If you've been listening for years but still feel like you can't speak, the solution isn't more listening. It's more responding, more activating what you already understand, more using your voice to take ownership of the language. Your brain already knows more English than you think. But knowledge isn't enough. You need to turn that knowledge into skill. And skill only comes from action, from opening your mouth, from saying the words, from building your own sentences, from making the language your own. That's the shift. That's where fluency begins. Not when you finally understand everything, but when you finally start responding out loud, in your own way, every single day. One technique I want to introduce to you today is called shadowing. If you haven't heard about it before, shadowing is a method where you listen to someone speaking in English and immediately repeat what they say, almost at the same time. It sounds simple, but it's actually one of the most powerful tools to improve both your listening and speaking skills together. I know that when you first hear about shadowing, it can seem difficult or even intimidating, but trust me, it's worth trying. It's like a workout for your brain and mouth at the same time, and it accelerates your path to fluency. When I explain shadowing to my students, I often say it's like being a shadow for the speaker. Imagine you're following every word they say, copying their rhythm, their pronunciation, and their intonation. You're not just repeating the words, you're trying to sound like them, almost like an echo. This trains your ear to catch details in English that you might miss if you're just listening passively. It also trains your mouth to move quickly, to produce sounds that may feel unfamiliar or tricky at first. The beauty of shadowing is that it forces your brain and mouth to work together. Normally, when we speak, we think first, then say the words. But with shadowing, you're practicing saying words without that extra time to think. This helps you get used to the natural flow of English and trains your brain to process and produce language much faster. At first, shadowing can be challenging. You might feel like you're stumbling over the words or that you're too slow to keep up. That's completely normal. Your brain and mouth are learning a new skill. Just like when you learn to ride a bike, the first attempts are awkward. But with practice, it becomes easier and more natural. Let me share a story about one of my students, Mia from Amsterdam. She was shy about speaking because she thought her pronunciation wasn't good enough. I suggested she try shadowing to improve her accent and fluency. At first, she was hesitant. She said, "Julia, it feels so fast. I can't keep up." But I encouraged her to start with short clips, just 20 or 30 seconds, and repeat small phrases. She practiced daily, even if just for 5 minutes. After a few weeks, Mia noticed her speaking became smoother and her confidence increased. She told me, "Shadowing helped me hear the music of English, and now I feel like I can dance along." That's the kind of progress shadowing brings. It's not about perfection. It's about rhythm and flow. When you shadow, you also pay attention to stress and intonation, which are crucial for sounding natural. English is a musical language, and shadowing helps you catch that melody. To start shadowing, pick something you enjoy listening to, maybe a podcast, a short speech, or even a scene from a movie. Make sure the audio is clear and the speaker talks at a natural pace, not too fast or too slow. Then, listen to a short segment once or twice to understand the meaning. After that, play the same segment and try to repeat immediately after the speaker, copying their voice as closely as you can. Don't worry if you don't understand every word. The goal isn't perfect comprehension at first, it's practicing the sounds and rhythm. You'll learn new words naturally as you repeat and listen. If something is really hard to say, you can slow down the audio or break the segment into smaller parts. Shadowing also helps you with pronunciation because you hear the correct way to say words and phrases repeatedly. This exposure trains your mouth to form sounds you might not use in your native language. Over time, your accent improves without having to study pronunciation rules or spend hours on drills. One important tip is to use shadowing regularly. Even 5 or 10 minutes a day can make a big difference if you're consistent. It's better to practice a little every day than to do long sessions once a week. Your brain needs that daily connection between hearing and speaking. Another great way to practice shadowing is to record yourself. After repeating the audio, record your voice and listen to it. Compare your pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation with the original. Don't be too hard on yourself. This is part of the learning process. Over time, you'll notice improvements, and that will motivate you to keep going. Shadowing is also a fantastic way to prepare for real conversations. Since you're practicing quick responses, your brain gets used to producing English faster. This reduces hesitation and fear when you speak with others because your mouth has already practiced the movements and sounds in advance. Remember, shadowing is not about memorizing scripts. It's about training your brain and mouth to work together, hearing English as it's really spoken, and copying that sound as closely as possible. It's like training your voice and ear to be friends, so they can help you speak fluently. If you feel stuck in your speaking progress, I encourage you to try shadowing. Pick a short, interesting audio and start practicing today. It might feel strange or difficult at first, but that's normal. Keep practicing, and you will see how quickly your fluency improves. The secret of shadowing is that it's active, fast, and fun. It pushes you out of your comfort zone gently, helping you build the muscle of speaking English naturally. When you combine shadowing with other methods like thinking in English or speaking out loud alone, you create a powerful toolkit for fluency. Your English voice is waiting to be unlocked. Shadowing is one of the keys that opens the door. Try it, keep going, and watch your English flow like never before, I want to tell you about Luca from Milan. Luca is a young professional who had been listening to English podcasts for nearly 2 years. He loved learning new words and understanding conversations, but there was one big problem: he never spoke. Whenever he tried, he felt nervous and unsure. His mind would freeze, and he'd quickly stop trying. This is a situation many learners face. They are great listeners but silent when it comes to speaking. When Luca first reached out to me, he said, "Julia, I listen to English all the time, but I can't speak. It's frustrating." I understood him perfectly because this is a common struggle. Listening is passive, speaking is active. You need both to become fluent. So, I introduced Luca to a practice called shadowing, repeating out loud what you hear immediately after the speaker. It's a way to train your mouth and brain together, speeding up your ability to produce English naturally. Luca was a bit hesitant at first. He said he wasn't sure if he could do it while walking in the park near his home. But I encouraged him to start with small steps, just 5 minutes per day. He chose his favorite English podcast, and every time he went for a walk, he pulled out his headphones, played a short clip, and repeated the sentences he heard, trying to copy the speaker's pronunciation and rhythm. At first, it was awkward. He stumbled over words, and sometimes he had to rewind the audio to catch up. But he didn't give up. He kept practicing daily, and after a few weeks, Luca noticed a big difference. His mouth became more comfortable forming English sounds. His confidence grew because he was speaking regularly, even if only to himself in the park. The hesitation and fear started to fade. One day, Luca told me about a moment at work when he surprised himself. During a meeting with his international team, he was asked to give his opinion on a project. Instead of freezing or avoiding the question, he took a deep breath and spoke up in English. His words weren't perfect, but they were clear and confident. That was the turning point. What changed for Luca wasn't a new grammar book or vocabulary list. It was active practice. Shadowing during his walks trained him to respond quickly and naturally. It connected his listening skills to speaking skills. He didn't wait for perfect conditions or for someone else to practice with. He created his own speaking moments every day. Luca's story shows how important it is to move from passive listening to active speaking. Many learners spend hours absorbing English through videos, podcasts, and reading. That's valuable, but without using your voice, your brain isn't fully prepared for real conversations. Shadowing helps bridge that gap by forcing you to produce language immediately. Another key point is that Luca made English part of his routine in a way that suited his lifestyle. Walking in the park became a learning time, combining movement with language practice. This made it enjoyable and sustainable. You don't need long study sessions or complicated schedules. Just find moments that work for you and use them consistently. If you find yourself stuck like Luca did, listening but not speaking, I encourage you to try shadowing. Start with short clips you enjoy and repeat what you hear out loud, matching the speaker's tone and pace as closely as you can. It's normal to feel awkward at first, but with regular practice, you'll build muscle memory and confidence. Remember, fluency is not about perfection. It's about the ability to communicate your ideas clearly and confidently. Luca's story reminds us that the key to speaking well is active practice, using your voice regularly, even if it's just for yourself. So, whether you're walking in a park, waiting for the bus, or doing chores at home, take those moments to speak English aloud. Your brain and mouth will thank you. You'll notice your hesitation fading and your fluency growing. Like Luca, you'll go from being a silent listener to a confident speaker. I want to talk about something very important today: how you see yourself as an English speaker. One of the biggest challenges many learners face is harsh self-criticism. You know that voice in your head that says, "My English isn't good enough," or I sound silly when I speak, or I have to be perfect. That voice can be your biggest obstacle. I want you to understand that your English is probably better than you think, but changing how you see yourself is the first step toward real progress. Many people have spent years learning English, and yet they still feel unsure or afraid to speak. Why? Because they focus on what's wrong instead of what works. They imagine that to be a good speaker, they need to sound like a native or never make a mistake. But that's not true. Fluency is not about perfection. It's about communication. It's about being understood and understanding others. I've seen this pattern with so many learners from different places, students from Paris, Madrid, Warsaw, Berlin, who were stuck because they thought their English wasn't good enough. They'd compare themselves to native speakers or advanced learners and feel discouraged. But the truth is, those comparisons only hold you back. You need to accept your English as it is right now, even if it's imperfect. Here's a story about Clara from Lisbon. She studied English for years and always focused on grammar and pronunciation. When she tried to speak, she'd stop and correct herself constantly. She told me, "I feel like I'm failing because I don't speak perfectly." I encouraged her to change that mindset and to see her English as a tool, something that helps her connect with people, not a test she has to pass flawlessly. Once Clara started accepting her mistakes as part of learning, her confidence grew, and she started to enjoy speaking more. Your mind shapes your reality. If you see yourself as a beginner or as someone who can't speak well, your brain will look for proof of that. But if you begin to tell yourself, "I can communicate, I'm improving every day," or "My English is good enough to connect with others," your brain will support that belief. Confidence is built by positive self-talk and acceptance. It's also important to recognize that English is a global language spoken by millions of non-native speakers every day. Most of them don't speak perfect English, but they communicate successfully. Their goal is clear communication, not flawless grammar. When you focus on clarity and sharing your ideas, you become part of a global community, opening doors to new opportunities. When you accept your English as functional and real, you stop hiding behind silence or overthinking every word. You start speaking more freely, and people respond to that energy. They understand you better because you're focused on meaning, not on sounding perfect. I encourage you to reflect on how you talk to yourself about your English. Are your thoughts supportive or critical? Changing those thoughts is not easy, but it's necessary. Start by celebrating small wins like finishing a sentence, understanding a new word, or having a simple conversation. These moments are proof that your English is working. Another way to build a better self-image is to record yourself speaking and listen kindly. You might notice things you want to improve, but also listen for the words you said well and the ideas you shared clearly. Over time, you'll see your progress, and that will motivate you to keep going. You don't need to wait until you're good enough to speak confidently. Confidence comes from doing, not from waiting. When you begin to accept your English as it is and use it regularly, you change how others see you too. People respond to your confidence, and that helps build more positive experiences with English. Remember, your English doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. It's your voice, your ideas, your connection to others that matter most. When you let go of excessive self-criticism and embrace your progress, you open doors to new relationships, jobs, and experiences. So today, I want you to start seeing yourself as a capable English speaker. Speak kindly to yourself. Recognize your efforts and progress. Celebrate your ability to communicate, even if it's not flawless. That mindset shift will change your entire journey. You have more ability than you realize. Your English is already better than you think. It's time to believe it and to use it proudly every day. One of the most important things I want to talk about today is the environment you create for your English learning. Your surroundings, the people you interact with, and the habits you develop can either speed up your progress or slow it down. The environment matters a lot when it comes to building fluency, and the good news is that you can design your own English environment no matter where you live, even if you're in a country where English is not the main language. Think about your brain like a muscle. It needs regular exercise to grow stronger. The more you expose your brain to English, the more natural it becomes to understand and use it. Even a few minutes every day can make a huge difference. It's not about studying for hours in a row, it's about creating daily contact with the language so your brain treats English as a normal part of your life. I often hear from learners who say, "I don't live in an English-speaking country, so I don't get enough practice." This is very common, and it's a real challenge, but it's not an excuse. You can build your own English environment wherever you are by making small, consistent changes to your daily routine. Let me give you some examples. One simple way to create immersion is to change the language settings on your phone, computer, or social media accounts to English. This forces your brain to interact with English every time you use technology. It might feel strange at first, but after a while, you'll get used to it and you'll pick up new words naturally. Another idea is to surround yourself with English media that you enjoy: podcasts, music, movies, TV shows, YouTube channels. Try to listen or watch something in English every day, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes. Choose content that interests you. When you enjoy what you listen to, it doesn't feel like a task, and you're more likely to keep going. You can also label things in your home with English words. For example, put a note on the door that says door, on the mirror mirror, or on the fridge fridge. This simple trick keeps your vocabulary active and reminds your brain to use English in your daily life. If you're comfortable, try to speak English aloud to yourself while doing everyday activities. Describe what you're doing or plan your day in English. This creates opportunities for practice and makes English part of your thinking process. Social media and online communities are also powerful tools. Join groups or forums where people practice English or find language exchange partners online. Even chatting with someone in text messages in English counts as daily contact and builds your confidence. What matters most is consistency. Your brain loves routines. When you meet English regularly, it starts to expect it. Over time, this exposure helps your brain make stronger connections and recall vocabulary faster. Your listening improves, your speaking feels more natural, and your overall confidence grows. Creating an English environment is also about mindset. If you think of English as something separate from your life, you'll struggle to practice regularly. But if you think of it as part of your day, like brushing your teeth or making coffee, you'll find it easier to stay motivated. I remember a student named Alex from Madrid who told me he felt stuck because he had no English speakers around him. We worked on building his English environment. He started listening to English news every morning while making breakfast and changed his phone's language to English. He also joined an online English book club. After a few months, his fluency and confidence improved dramatically. He said, "English stopped feeling like a school subject and became part of my life." Even if you only have 5 minutes, find a way to bring English into your day. It could be listening to a favorite song and paying attention to the lyrics, watching a short video, reading a news headline, or speaking to yourself about your plans. These small moments add up, and your brain will thank you for the regular workout. Remember, you don't need to move to an English-speaking country to immerse yourself in the language. You can create your own immersion zone, right where you are. It's about daily contact, making English a natural part of your environment, and keeping your brain active with the language every day. Your progress depends a lot on the environment you create. The more English you meet daily, the more your brain accepts it as normal, and the faster you will improve. So, think about how you can build your English environment starting now. Make small changes that fit your life and interests, and watch how your fluency grows naturally over time. I want to share the story of Sofia from Madrid because it perfectly shows how small, simple changes can create a powerful English environment, even if you don't live in an English-speaking country. Sofia was a university student who felt stuck in her English journey. She had studied for years, but she still didn't feel comfortable speaking or thinking in English. She wanted to improve but wasn't sure how to fit English practice into her busy life. Sofia decided to take control by creating what I like to call a mini English world right at home. She knew she didn't need big or complicated changes, just small habits that would make English part of her everyday life. The first thing she did was change the language on her phone to English. At first, it was confusing and sometimes frustrating. She had to look up words she didn't understand, but this simple step forced her brain to interact with English all day long. Next, Sofia started watching her favorite TV series in English without subtitles. This was a challenge at first because she was used to watching with Spanish subtitles to understand every word, but she realized that by removing subtitles, she had to focus more and pay attention to how words were pronounced, the rhythm of the language, and the expressions used. This helped her listening skills improve faster than she expected. Sofia also joined an online English conversation group that met once a week. The group was made up of learners from different countries, all practicing together via video chat. This weekly commitment gave her a safe space to speak regularly. At first, she was nervous, but because the group was supportive and friendly, she started to feel more confident each time. Talking to others made English feel more real and less like a school subject. All these small actions created a steady flow of English practice in Sofia's daily life. She didn't have to set aside hours to study or find expensive courses. Instead, she built habits that fit naturally into her routine. She noticed that in just 6 months, her ability to understand spoken English and speak with more confidence had improved dramatically. What I love about Sofia's story is that she took ownership of her learning environment. She didn't wait for perfect conditions or an English-speaking country. She created opportunities for immersion at home. This shows that your environment isn't just about where you live, it's about the choices you make every day. When you change your phone language, watch shows without subtitles, or speak regularly with others, you're telling your brain that English is important. You're training your brain to switch between languages more easily. You're building fluency through real practice, not just passive learning. If you're wondering how to start, Sofia's example is a great guide. Pick 1 or 2 small habits that feel manageable. Maybe change your phone's language to English this week. Next week, try watching a favorite show without subtitles for just 10 minutes. Find a conversation group online or practice speaking to yourself for a few minutes each day. These small steps build momentum, and momentum leads to progress. You don't need big changes or perfect conditions. What matters is consistent, daily contact with English that fits your life. When you create your own mini English world, you build confidence naturally. Your brain starts to expect English regularly, and your fluency grows. Sofia's story reminds us that learning English is not just about studying hard. It's about living English in your daily life. By creating habits that bring English closer to you, you turn it from a foreign language into a natural part of your world. This shift is what truly transforms your ability to speak, understand, and enjoy English. So, think about your own life and what small changes you can make today. You don't have to wait. Start building your mini English environment now, just like Sofia did. It might surprise you how quickly your English will improve when you invite it into your daily routine. I want to end today's conversation with something very important. the final shift you need to make on your journey to fluency. This shift is about how you see yourself. So far, we've talked about many strategies, stories, and tips, but the real change doesn't come from learning more vocabulary or buying expensive courses. The real change begins when you decide to see yourself as a speaker of English. It's easy to get stuck waiting for the right moment to speak perfectly or waiting until you feel ready. But fluency isn't about being perfect or having no mistakes. It's about showing up and practicing even when you feel insecure or make errors. Everyone who speaks a second language has made mistakes. What sets successful learners apart is their willingness to keep going despite those mistakes. Think about this. Every time you speak English, you're training your brain and your mouth to work together. The more you speak, the more confident and natural you become. Even if your words are not perfect, if you're using English regularly, you're moving closer to fluency every day. The key is to act like a speaker right now, not a student waiting to become one someday. I want to encourage you to take action today. Choose one phrase, one idea, or one attitude that will be your starting point. It could be a simple sentence you want to practice speaking aloud. It could be a decision to think in English for 5 minutes today. It could be joining a conversation, group, or even just talking to yourself in the mirror. Whatever it is, let that be your turning point. When you commit to speaking, even imperfectly, you transform your relationship with English. You become an active participant in your own learning instead of a passive observer. You stop holding back and start creating opportunities. And that's when real fluency begins. So right now, I invite you to make that decision. Take a deep breath and say to yourself, I am a speaker of English. Use that mindset as your foundation. Remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about being brave enough to speak and learn from every experience. If this message makes sense to you, I encourage you to leave a like on this episode and subscribe to our channel. By doing that, you're not just supporting the English Talk community, you're making a commitment to yourself. You are joining thousands of learners who are ready to transform their English through action, and don't stop here. Keep practicing. Keep speaking, and keep believing in your ability to grow. Your fluency journey is yours to create, and it starts with one small step today. Take that step now. You can do this.